I want to talk about universals today, something that hopefully we can all relate to. And because this is hospice, I hope it'll be practical. You know, there's a Native American saying that says, if you can't grow corn with it, what use is it? So we want to try and make this useful to you, and to not only to you personally, but to your own clients and patients. So I want you now just to do a little meditation for a few minutes. Sit up straight and relax and take some deep breaths. Center yourself from the end of the week. If you want, you can close your eyes. And just imagine you've got to take this very profound journey. You don't actually know where the place is, but somewhere, say, in outer Mongolia that you're going to have to travel to. It's very hard to find information. Nobody seems to have been there before. There's no map, there's no terrain, you can't find it on Google. There may be a few friends or people you know who can talk a little bit about the area and the territory, but not really. And you don't really know who's going to meet you there, how you're going to get there, what's going to happen there, how you're going to negotiate the area, and how you're going to get back, and if actually you're going to get back. So just with that in mind, take in some deep breaths and expand your lungs. And just think about the fact how little we know about this great journey that we're going to take, and how little time and effort we spend trying to learn about it. So in a sense, that's what we're going to talk about today in terms of universal principles, which we're going to talk about. But maybe just for a few minutes or half a minute, just think about the concerns you might have and the questions you might want to ask yourself, or that your clients might ask of you, and hopefully we'll answer those today. So come back to your body, and let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. Firstly, we're going to talk a little bit about proof of the cosmology, how to prepare, the crossing over, the realms, how to negotiate them, and the pathologies of death, and pretty much what we talked about now. The trouble is that most of us don't know before we go, and there is a subconscious fear that everybody has about death, which tends to make us avoid talking about it or dealing with it. So hopefully you'll be more prepared when you leave here today. So what about the proof? Well, this isn't scientific proof, but you know, those of you who have experienced near-death experiences or have read about it understand that there's usually a universal kind of a phenomenon. One goes through a tunnel and then breaks into light, which feels like the divine love. And then you usually come across a barrier, a lake or a river or a gate, and you turn back, either by a voice or one of your ancestors or guides who says, it's not your time, you've got to go back. Universally, everybody who has to go back resents coming back. They really would prefer to have not come back. But what happens to them is when they do come back, they have no question in their mind that there's life after death. And not only that, but their life is usually transformed. They usually start in a life of service. Those of you who know William Peters has taken that a step further in the shared crossing experience, where a living loved one can go part of the way where the person is dying and see what it's like on the other side. Some of you may have read Ibn Alexander's book about proof of heaven, a Harvard neurosurgeon who didn't believe any of this stuff, which is kind of interesting because the experience is well known, but this guy is a Harvard neurosurgeon who's now a believer after his almost 3-week-long near-death experience. You can look at ancient wisdom and what the Tibetans called a delog or a delok, who's a person like Alexander who came back from the dead after a period of time to relate what they saw there. Remember, what a Tibetan is going to see there is going to be very different to everybody's experience here, because we create our own reality, and it's going to be different for everybody. Then there are Bushmen of the Kalahari who actually induce a near-death experience when they go on the out-of-body travel, out-of-body spirit healing dance. And they call it the little death because sometimes the initiates that are inexperienced don't come back. Remember that we have a silver cord that connects our soul to our body, that we travel out of when we go into the astral with sleep. And the Bushmen do this voluntarily with their trance dance, and sometimes they don't come back, and that's because it's so compelling on the other side. So there are many, many reasons. If we look at ancient wisdom, we can see the maps and the territory, but there is proof, but of course you can't say that it's scientific. So how did I get to this? Well, firstly, when I was initiated in 2002, I sort of was already steeped in some yoga and Buddhist thoughts. I certainly believed in reincarnation. I believed in the afterlife. I believed in the spirit world. But when I learned from the Sangomas about divination, I learned how to diagnose the pathologies of death. So essentially I got it in through the back door of this work, and dealt with pathology and healing of problems, and that's what I want to address today, because this is where you can really make a difference to yourselves and to your patients. So how do we prepare? Well, preparation, is about conscious living, and that's a lifelong experience. We shouldn't do it at the last moment. Some of your clients are going to be leaving it to the last moment, so it's going to be hard to tell them anything. But essentially it's about conscious living and being accountable to karma and to free will. This is from Kabir, who said, dying, the world keeps on dying, but none knows how to die. No one dies in such a way that he or she won't die again. In other words, the wheel of samsara, the fact that we are bound by free will to a karmic path, we are responsible for what we do, and to the extent that we do it or we don't do it, we come back again until we get it right. Who here believes in reincarnation, just to give you an idea? So most of us, so good, that makes a start. So these are the things we're going to be accountable for. Destiny, when we go out to the other side, we meet a tribunal who's going to talk to us in a loving fashion and say, hey, let's see what you did here. We're going to be accountable for following our own destiny, for healing the planet and correcting injustice, for doing no harm, for subordinating ego to the higher self, and to the extent that we loved and we're in joy. Pretty simple stuff, but very, very difficult. So it requires a dedicated preparation and lifelong practice, and it's time to start way ahead of time. So I want to just touch on dreams, because dreams are an important hint as to what happens when you go into the death realm. The Eastern traditions regard death as being very similar to the dream state. So we go through the death experience. There's the intermediate stage of death that the Tibetans call the bardo, approximately 49 days, where they hang around the earth plane, and then they reconcile with their karma in this intermediate stage, and then there's a rebirth into a new incarnation. We are reborn into the family that's the most likely to be able to help us with our karma, not necessarily the family that we want to be reborn into. But if we look at the dream state, we go through a dreamless sleep state, which is a deep delta state of sleep, then into a more active early morning REM sleep. And in this stage, this is when the veil between the worlds is more permeable and spirit guides can be more accessible to us. So there are two ways we dream. One is through the subconscious. The other is we travel into the astral and we visit past lives, we go into parallel universes, we meet people that we know in the dream but we don't know in real time. And the dream state is a rehearsal, a dress rehearsal for death. It's very, very similar. It's called the imaginal realm because whatever you imagine, and if you're a lucid dreamer you know this, whatever you imagine will happen instantaneously in the dream time. So the dreams can really help us understand death better, help us work out our karma, go back to past lives and tap into store consciousness, the consciousness of our karmic blemishes. And then we awaken to a new day, so it's very similar to this. So all ancient wisdom recognizes that this state you're in now is really no different to the dream state, and it's no different to death. It's just a different form of it, a different context. So this is what we're going to talk about, releasing and passing over, and how you can help yourselves and others, the vibratory realms that we will go into, and the pathologies. Clearly this is a mystery, as was mentioned. We don't really know what's going on, but these are some hints that I've learned from the Sangomas. And over the years, what happened when I came back from South Africa in 2002, a friend of mine who ran the Omega program, Mary Ellen Kelly, I was teaching on the Omega program for her, and suddenly she started to have dreams for the both of us. So a lot of the stuff that you're going to hear here is from the dreams that she had. I would get one-liners and songs and metaphors. She would get downloads. Complete download. She was an amazing dream channel. She passed about 2 years ago. So a lot of this is from ancestors, Druid, Celtic ancestors, African ancestors, Kabbalistic ancestors. So it's not our stuff, it's their stuff. And they were very keen on universals. It's not about any one tradition. They were trying to give us universal principles that everybody can relate to, regardless of religion, culture, and background. So let's talk about the first one. But before that, we'll talk about one of the dysfunctions of death, the earthbound spirit, who is somebody who doesn't cross over. It's a real phenomenon, and we're going to go into it a bit further. And we'll see how earthbound spirit is another form of a shade, an intrusive spirit. There's nothing good about being haunted by an earthbound spirit. For instance, if you have one in your house, it's not a quaint thing. You need to find a way to get rid of it. We'll visit this again later. So passing over, what do we have to remember here? And I think this is pretty universal. A mind state is key. We have to create the reality that we want with intention. So if you're dealing with somebody or a loved one or a client, it's really important that you maybe help them with a mantra or an imagination where they can go to a space that they remember maybe as a child underneath a tree by a river, so that they can create a vibration that's positive, because the vibration that you're going to go to will be very similar to the vibration that you're in on this plane. Much better to go straight away to the vibration that you deserve rather than to a lower vibration. So you need, and Gandhi was actually heard to be chanting the name of God, Ram, Ram, when he was shot, to try and generate that vibration. It doesn't have to be anything complicated, something really simple that you can maybe tailor to somebody that you know that'll be valuable to them. One has to have fearless clarity without any confusion whatsoever. Fear is going to precipitate a vibration, and this is also true for the dream time. If you've watched a horrible movie, you'll often have terrible dreams that night because you're traveling into the astral, into vibration you don't really want to be in, and you feel it. So that's a good dress rehearsal as well. Release from attachments. We're going to talk about this a lot. I had a Buddhist teacher once who said you have to imagine yourself dead and you're watching from the other side. Somebody's living in your house with your partner, your significant other. Everybody's happy without you. Your kids are happy. Your partner, your ex-wife or husband is even happier. He or she is wearing your clothes, driving your car. Everybody's happy. And whoever's managing your business is also very happy. And that's a good practice in non-attachment. So you can't go with any attachments. Some time back I had a dream where a bunch of us were crossing a kind of a river. It was like the river Styx. And we were in a boat, and this guy arrived late to the party. He was standing on the riverbank completely naked, and all he had on was his flip-flops. And we were shouting to him to jump in and swim. We would pull him into the boat. And the guy, you could see, he was looking at his flip-flops. It was the last thing that he had left that he was hanging on to. And he eventually decided to jump in, and he was only swimming with his arms because he didn't want to lose his flip-flops. So he lost one of them, and then he was swimming with one leg up, holding on to his flip-flops. And before he could reach the boat, there was this whirlpool, and it just sucked him down to the earth plane. So remember that attachments are not something that you want to have. It's a good practice. One has to surrender, let go completely, sort of go into an existential free fall in a way. There's nothing fearful about death. It's been likened to a bee sting at the worst. But fear is going to be a problem. And one has to be non-confused, so you can hear the voices of the ancestors calling you home, and you can attend to the light, which the Buddhists call the Dharmakaya, your natural own luminescence, that part of you made in the image of the divine that you will experience when you go through the tunnel of light into the love. So this is from the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is basically a summary of what I've just said. And they read it for 49 days while the spirit is on the earth plane. The Zulus have their own rituals to try and prevent somebody from being earthbound, but this is to help the spirit move on to the right plane. So you are dead, go forward, release without fear. Do not cling to images of the past or the illusory projections of mind. Recognize your own luminescence, let go, surrender. Not difficult, but sometimes challenging. All right. All right, so the soul lingers a while and spirits visit to announce their death. Sometimes because there's a living loved one somewhere far away, out of touch, who's not going to know, they might appear to that person in a dream to tell them that they're going to go. They come to complain or request attention. Often this is because there's fighting about the will, or they say, let's burn the old hag instead of burying her, and the woman wanted to be buried. So they will come and complain if necessary. They also come for closure, unfinished business. For instance, maybe they can't find the will, or alternatively, they want to come and say there's $15,000 under the mattress that nobody knew about, things like that. They may not come to the person involved. They might come to somebody else because they can't get through to the one who really needs to know. So they'll often come to somebody who can be the right channel. And very important, they come to ask or give forgiveness. All this is best done beforehand, as we will see. Okay, now death rituals are really important. They need to feel loved and honored. They have to be obituaries, or maybe accolades, or a death stone, or whatever they wanted, flowers, whatever it is that they've requested. And it's a good idea to know what they want. One has to honor their requests. So if they wanted to be cremated, don't bury them, and vice versa. If they wanted their ashes thrown away somewhere or scattered somewhere, I sometimes do divinations for people, and 3 years have gone past and the urn is still sitting on the, in the home, and it hasn't been taken care of. These are reasons for the person to be earthbound. They're not happy about what's happened, and it holds them. I think folks and the dead also have to know when to let go. I think it's important, if somebody's passing on to the other side, that their loved ones let them know that it's okay for them to go. It's also good to have closure and to do everything, because the loved one might be on the other side because there's stuff going on. Another thing that I encounter with the work I do. They're fighting about the will. There's a lawsuit going on. The brother is saying to the sister, you forged the signature. How come you got the whole thing? I mean, this type of stuff will hold the person back. Not only will that hold them back, but if they see a loved one on the other side who's really suffering, they tend to feel they need to hang around until they're okay. And that might be a year or 2 or 3 sometimes, which retards their progress. So it's really important for the ones on this side to allow the spirit not only to pass over, but to leave the earth plane and go over to the other side. Forgiveness is the big F, I would say, that's involved over here. Okay, well, earthbound spirits, really important thing to know. It's a form of shade. It's an easier form of shade to deal with, but it's usually because they have unfinished business, they've been dishonored, or some of the things I've talked about. Their attachments to persons, usually a person who's died in the home. They might have been living there on their own for many years. They just don't even know they're dead most of the time. Sometimes the earthbound spirits don't know they're dead. They're just hanging around the earth plane thinking this is normal. Places. Workplaces. These are the obsessive compulsive control freaks who want to control their work even from the other side, and they don't understand why people are not speaking to them and they're ignoring them. But so they don't even know that what's going on. Objects as well. Fear and confusion. This is really important from the hospice point of view. You don't want the person to be overloaded with morphine. You want them to have some kind of clarity so that they can pass over to the other side without being completely obtunded. Very important that they don't get OD'd on morphine. Just to keep, they must be pain-free, but they should not be unconscious. Sudden traumatic death is a common cause of being earthbound. Suicide, murder, war, drugs, a sudden car accident, something like that. False beliefs. People who do not believe in another realm, they're more likely to be earthbound. Sometimes those who don't believe will come back later to say, well, I was wrong, I'm sorry. They see that they were wrong. These don't apply abortion, miscarriage, but it does also happen. The baby spirit can hang around. They tend to gravitate around hospitals, cemeteries, jails, objects connected to them. Therefore, be careful about what antiques you collect, or what demonic-looking masks you get from Africa, and objects of war. So these are all indications for some attention. Ancestors say there are just as many paths in death as there are in life. There are countless vibrations within vibrations, and like I say, nobody knows the whole story, but this is just a sort of an idea of what's going on here. These are the basic realms, knowing that there are realms within realms within realms as well, countless vibrations. Celestial, angelic doesn't really apply. I think some people are getting angelic visitations and downloads and channeling are probably getting it from saints or similar enlightened people from the causal realm. The causal realm is a place of perfected souls, of enlightened, self-realized beings. And these are people who retain free will, and they do not have to come back unless they want to come back. Many of them choose to come back to do service. It doesn't turn out well. Like look at like Gandhi, for instance, Martin Luther King, Mandela. They know it's going to be bad for them when they come back, but they come back anyway. They retain free will, and they don't need to come back, and they can do service from the other side. And the Zohar says that the sages are more present dead than when they were alive. Reason being, they're not localized in space and time. They have a tremendous advantage. They can bilocate. They have knowledge of your karmic life book. They know what to do. They can actually do more than they could when they were in a body. So the astral is where we're going to go, most of us. And the astral is the imaginal realm where basically we go to reconcile with our karma and we come back again and reincarnate. Then there are the lower realms as well. These are the hell realms, the realms of the hungry ghosts. Hungry, why? Because your addictions, your obsessions, your compulsions get worse there. If you're an alcoholic, you crave alcohol much more. Possession is real. Every now and then one of these demonic, disembodied spirits comes out of the lower realms and possesses somebody's body. These are usually people that have got a broken aura, that have severe soul loss. It's not a normal person. They can't do that. But possession is real, and exorcism is important, although it's very, very dangerous work. So we are carried by our hearts, which is love, and karma to the realm we feel most at home. We can only go where we can vibrate to. So we earn a certain vibration. We cannot escape that vibration. Our karma will imprint a certain vibration in us. The only problem is sometimes we can go to a realm that we don't deserve, a lower realm, and that's what we have to be careful of. We lose touch with those we can no longer vibrate with. If they're in a higher vibration, we can't get up there. If they are in a low vibration, we may lose touch with them, but we can go down, we can't go up. Spiritual masters can travel freely through all the realms. To others, however, the higher realms are invisible. So in reality, you can't go up to a higher realm because you're going to feel very uncomfortable in a higher realm. It's not like, if you want to and you went there, you wouldn't feel comfortable. You have to go to the vibration that you deserve, but certainly not to the one that you don't deserve. It's governed by accountability, which is about karma, the law of cause and effect. You don't get away with anything. And this is done in a witnessing sort of fashion. So some of you might have seen the Meryl Streep thing called Defending Your Life. It's not about good or bad or wrong or right or evil or whatever. It's all about skillfulness or unskillfulness. The witnessing process is done in a loving way, and in the movie it's represented like a prosecutor and a defendant, and you have a video rerun, which is probably kind of what happens of your life, and they look at the particulars and they say, see what you did here? Wasn't so good, Maybe we've got to fix that one for you, which means coming back again. What's important to know is that forgiveness will release you from any karmic blemish that you have. Forgiveness is huge. Rather than it be done early on when somebody's alive, but it can be done after life as well, but it's much more difficult. Forgiveness is huge. It's embedded in truth. The truths of spirit are completely different to the truths on the other side, So some people are in for a surprise. Your lawyer can't help you up there. Jesus said it the simplest, those who will be first will be last. He who loses himself, she who loses herself will find herself. The one who loses the little self will find the big self. You subordinate ego to the higher self, you're in good shape. It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. It's nothing to do with wealth, it's to do with attachment. You can be very wealthy and unattached and easily enter the kingdom, but not with attachments, not with desires and obsessions about them. So these truths are very, very different to what we understand here, but we will be accountable for these things, which are the things I mentioned when it came to the rules of karma. And then we are accountable to the extent that we loved, all the beings, not just our immediate loved ones. Now, how do we travel? We travel with will, passion, intention, and we can imagine anything. The difference between here and there, there are lots of workshops going on telling people how to manifest whatever they want in their life, and the principles are true. They're really designed for spiritual progress, but the principles are true. You have to imagine what you want. You have to really believe in it. That's the ringer. And if you do that, it's going to happen, and it probably will. But the ringer is you've got to believe that you really deserve an island in the Bahamas, and few people can do that. So it happens, though, because we're time-bound, it takes a long, long time before it happens. There it happens instantaneously. So there's a story about a guy who comes over to the astral realm, and Bishop Tutu says the standards for heaven are extremely low. So this is because in a sense, the astral might feel like heaven, but it can be a kind of a hell. I remember Mary Ellen Kelly comparing it to being locked up in Costco. You can have whatever you want, but you can't get out, and you don't know anybody there. So the low astral is not a lot of fun. So anyway, this guy ends up in the astral, and he's got this guide who's come here to guide him how to imagine. And the fellow says to him, you can just have whatever you want. Imagine what you want and it'll be there. So he says, well, I was a golf fanatic when I was alive. I think I'll just imagine myself playing golf. The only problem is what you imagine happens. So every time you hit the ball, it's a hole in one. So he's playing on these magnificent courses with beautiful people, and he comes back to the other guy and he says, this is no fun. There's no tension. There's no competition. It's really boring. So the fellow says, try something else. So he says, okay, well, I always wanted to have a harem of gorgeous women. So he imagines a harem, a beautiful woman, and he comes back a little bit later and he says, this is also boring. It's always the same old thing. He said, why don't we go down to hell for a while and see what that's like? So the guy says, sir, you are in hell. So remember, the low astral is not fun. I think the higher astral apparently can be very nice. Hanging out with folks like this would be okay. But Costco, I'm not so sure about. So you can imagine anything, and there's actually quite a nice movie with Robin Williams, What Dreams May Come, might be worth, where the guy is showing him how to imagine. Some of these movies are good. They've done their homework well. So the astral, these are what I understand from my teachings from Sangomas and others. We have a few choices. We can either reconcile and we return. We usually come back into the same family, the same blood root. We come back because it's often the same family who can best teach us what we need to learn. For instance, I don't know exactly how it works, but say a man was very abusive to women in his lifetime, he might come back as a woman into a family and then be abused, and that would be the way to learn the lesson. So it works that way. You don't necessarily come where you want to go, you go where you need to go. But there is another option. You can become a guide. So the black woman who was a Sangoma in her previous life is the woman who helps me with my divinations. So without her, the divinations would be unreadable. So by helping me, she lifts me up and makes me more than I am. But by allowing her to help me, I lift her up. In Zulu, they say, pagamisa. You make them come alive. You give them things to do. She can bump up her karmic brownie points, so to speak, and do service from the other side. Remember that when we're in the astral, we lose free will. The only way we can do service is through the free will of another person on this side of the planet. So by allowing some people on the other side to help us, we help them a lot. Really, really important work to do is to think about that. I also think that you can graduate. I once came across the word called Summerland, which sounds like summer school, that if you didn't quite make the cut you can sort of come, graduate to a higher level, because you do learn things on the other side. So 3 basic options. I'm not sure you can graduate easily to the causal realm, but maybe you can bump up your vibration a little ways. So we retain our persona and our language and the clothes we wear. The person might come dressed differently. They may be in resplendent garb, or maybe just with a t-shirt and shorts and sandals or something like that. They don't lose their idiosyncrasies, but they gain new knowledge and they release from prior dysfunction. So they are more perfected in terms of what they know. So the religious fanatic may still keep their religion, but won't be so dogmatic about it. The person who didn't believe in an afterlife will acknowledge there is an afterlife. So they're not quite the same, and they're also not localized in space and time. So a spirit guide is something very useful that you can have, because remember, it's got nothing to do with education. They have wisdom beyond our knowing. They can be in many places at one time. They have access to our karmic life book, so they can really help us. So the fact that you've got 3 PhDs and maybe your grandfather was a simple farmer doesn't mean that he knows more than you. He often does know a lot more than we do. So don't be put off by being visited by harsh relationships that you had. As long as they weren't dysfunctional, don't worry if they were dictatorial, because they are now slightly more perfected than they were before. So really, to summarize, it's a school for the higher self. We can create any reality, but eventually they become boring and dissipate. So you either got to do service or you got to come back. We go in the direction of our ruling passions, which endure. We know our archetype on the other side. Frequently, we don't know what our archetype is when we're on this plane. Most of us don't. It's really a challenge. But when you go to the other side, you see your karmic life book, you know exactly who you're supposed to be. And hopefully when you come back, you'll be that, although of course you will get involved in life, and that can be difficult, and you lose the way, which happens to all of us. The living can assist the imagination of the dead. Rituals make them come alive. We'll talk a bit about the ancestral altar and the ancestral practice at the end. Forgiveness is huge, absolutely huge. So let's look at this as a sleep incubation to improve the soul's path. We refine our desires by witnessing in a loving fashion. They help us do it for ourselves. They don't tell us what's right. It's not judgment day. Soul and love bonds occur for the same vibration. Sex happens on the other side. The best example of this is, a woman or a man can have an orgasm when they are in the astral and dreaming, and they can have a sexual encounter with an orgasm, and then they'll wake up with the orgasm and the pleasurable feeling because it's embodied through the silver cord. And a male, of course, will have a wet dream. But other than that, the sex happening on the other side is exactly the same as it would be in the imagination. And the Darby and Joan connections where they can't live without each other, those folks are going to hook up. No question about it. Whether that's a good thing for spiritual growth and spiritual perfection, I'm not sure. But certainly it's comforting, and nice to know where you're going. But they do occur. It's good news in a way. Causal realm. This is the place of pure consciousness of enlightened beings. Nobody really knows what it looks like. The Vedanta folks call it neti, not that. Whatever you think it is, it's not that. It's bliss, it's pure bliss, it's a place where the soul can dream. It's you drop the astral body, so there's no astral body, there's no mind, there's no ego, there's no male, there's no female, there's no sexuality. Remember, the soul is sexually undifferentiated. We come in and out of many, many different lifetimes, sometimes different cultures, different religions, although we usually go back to our blood root. I think that's why the Dalai Lama says, don't give up your religion, because eventually we're probably going to find we're going to hang out with the same people that we knew from before. Buddhism and yoga is just a tool. It's not really a religion. It's there to help us get through all this kind of stuff. So this is the causal realm of enlightened beings. They retain free will, unlike us in the astral, and they don't have to come back, which is kind of a nice thought. Imagine coming back 100 years from now, the way things are going. So the pathologies of death. It's all about cosmic union. Go forward with forgiveness, which is essential to substance and joy. This is from the ancestors. It's all about forgiveness. A shade was a term I was introduced to by my Sangoma mentor, and it's actually a Hebrew word for a ghost as well, which is kind of interesting. I don't know how the word got there. But the shade that we've talked about is the earthbound spirit, which is very different to a shade, which is because of skeletons in the family closet or because of unfinished business, guilt, shame, remorse, whole different story. This is why forgiveness is so important before they check out. Now, the Bible says, honor your father and mother. It's the only commandment that says that your days will be long upon the earth. There's an onus on the child to honor the mother and the father and the grandmothers and the grandfathers in African tradition. It doesn't mean you have to honor your gardener if your gardener did something bad to you. But your mother and father, it doesn't say like, it doesn't say love, it just says honor, because they gave you live birth. So psychotherapy is great, but when it comes to the end of the day, one has to forgive and release. So this is very important, because sometimes the living are haunted by the dead because the dead want forgiveness. And they become a shade around them, they become an intrusive spirit, and there's nothing good about being haunted. It gets in the way of your life flow, it affects your luck, it affects your relationship, it affects your work. People don't quite understand what's going on, but you might go for a job interview and they have a funny feeling about you because there's this thing around, kind of the wrong kind of aura. So you don't want to be haunted. That's a good reason for forgiveness, because when you forgive, you release the spirit from its karmic problem, and then they are no longer duty bound to come and do that all over again, which is a huge thing. There are other reasons that you want to forgive, because the sins of the fathers and the mothers and the grandfathers and the grandmothers are visited upon the children unto the fourth generation, is the other biblical saying. Native Americans might say unto the seventh generation. Well, what does that mean? It doesn't mean if my father robbed a bank, I'm accountable for his karma. But it does mean that an impure and imperfect spirit who's an alcoholic, who was abusive, is going to more than likely come back into the same bloodline as a grandson, a granddaughter, or maybe even a son or daughter or niece or nephew. And far better be it that the person is at least purified from that calamity, that they don't have to come back again and repeat that. So forgiveness will make them more whole, more healthy, more wholesome. In Africa, it's done with sacrifice, but we can do it in different ways with rituals that are more pleasant for us. So there are three reasons you want to forgive. One reason is you don't want to be haunted by an intrusive spirit. It's not good to be haunted. The other reason is if you're going to have somebody come back into the bloodline, let them at least be cured of the alcoholic syndrome. Remember that alcohol might be genetic, it might be chemical, but it might also be energetic and karmic as well. So you want to cure the karmic problem relating not only to alcohol but other concerns. Rather have the spirit come in that way. The other thing is now is neuroscience is showing that forgiveness is healthful. If you look at patients, for instance, AIDS patients who have forgiven the person who gave them the HIV virus, they have higher T cell counts and they live longer than ones who have not forgiven them. We never heal until we forgive. We've got to lay down that burden down by the riverside. We don't want to study war no more, in the words of that African American spiritual song. When we study war, we've got this albatross hanging around our neck that we're unaware of. And we've got to get rid of it. So it's healthful. A lack of forgiveness, cynicism, will also increase your pro-inflammatory factors in your bloodstream, which enhance bad health, autoimmune diseases, inflammatory diseases, certain cancers, and so on. So forgiveness is healthful, gets rid of intrusive energies, intrusive spirits, and also improves incarnations that are going to come. So this is just a summary of what we've been talking about. Here we are, this is us, the family constellation, the community. Here's the veil between the worlds. and then stuck between the worlds are the earthbound spirits, one form of shade. So there's no, if you know, you don't want to have you want to check before you buy a house. You even have to now declare to the person who's buying your house if somebody died in the house. Important to know that it's recognized legally now. This is the astral realm, this one here. And remember, there are all kinds of spirits here. There's human and non-human. There's light and there's dark. There's cosmic. There's terrestrial or bush spirits. There's water spirits. There's mythical spirits that aren't really mythical, because if you think of leprechauns and goblins and fairies, these are real spirits that people can see that have certain names depending on culture and tradition. But there are all sorts of so-called mythical spirits which are not really mythical. They're very real, including dragons. Dragons are real, believe it or not. There's no free will in the astral, and this is where we basically either help and become a guide or we reconcile. And then here on this side we have realms within realms of the sages in the causal realms. Remember that we create our own reality. So the Buddhists will go to a pure land and they'll be hanging out with Buddhists, and the yogis will go to the causal and they'll be hanging out with yogis. And the Kabbalists will go to the Garden of Eden, and more than likely they'll be hanging out together. But the message that the ancestors are trying to purvey to us is that we're all one, although we're not the same, and that's really where we should be heading to, which is what the causal is about. It doesn't matter where you end up as long as you're comfortable in that particular realm. So these are just some caveats at the end that I thought we would add to the summary. The dead are not dead. The connection can be nurtured. You can have an ancestral spirit guide practice. When you're crossing over, no confusion, no fear, positive vibration. Go into free fall with positive imaging. Be unattached to anything whatsoever. So in life it means attend to needs, not wants. And attend to the skeletons in the closet, because you want to reconcile these before you go. Very important. So an ancestor altar, for some of your clients that might be receptive, or for you or your friends or loved ones, this might be a good idea. I've done it in selective instances, even close to death, and I found that for some folks it's very comforting for them to prepare, because more than likely they're going to hang out with their ancestors. To set up an altar, to put containers on the altar, photographs, maybe a ring or a cup. Maybe they want to wear the ring or the necklace or use the cup that can bond them to the ones that they love. Don't put anybody on the altar that was dysfunctional or abusive. You only want the good guys. But the strict ones might be good, because they were strict when you were little and they shouted at you doesn't mean they were bad, So don't eliminate those. Set up sacred space, and go and check into the sacred space on a regular basis. Light candles, incense, make offerings. You can say your prayers there. You can have incantations. You can practice, or they can practice, some kind of imagination when they want to pass over. All this is useful. If they've got time, some of them have got 6 months or more, they might have time for celebrations, for rituals, Thanksgiving, put out a plate of food for their ancestors. Start to connect with them. As they get closer to death, the veil between the worlds gets more permeable. So they start to see their ancestors, they start to see their guides. Some of them freak out because they don't have good karma. They start to see what they've done. They start to see the people they may have abused that are now on the other side. And they don't know what's going on, and they get very fearful, and there's nothing much you can do to help those. But many times it's the opposite way around, and it's good to confirm it to them and endorse it. The mother that comes to them and says, don't worry, everything's going to be fine. That's real. It's not just a dream. It's real. And you can endorse it. Music is, I think, important. I did give a CD to Stephen. Music, sometimes I kind of laugh about it, because some of the songs that I get, I found are very good to die to. And and they're very good if you're very sick. There have been folks who felt they couldn't have gotten through a hospital encounter without the music. Great for kids who are having bad nightmares and so on. It's the vibration of the music. So you're welcome to have Steve copy it for you, or copy it from him, and if you want to use them, you're very welcome to do so. great for dogs, because my business manager, her dog was about to die for the last year or so, and she played the music to her dog, and the dog would come alive when it listened to the music, and it would want to go for a walk. It would be lying there sort of moribund, and then as soon as she played the music, the dog would sort of wake up. And then recently a woman who came for a divination from San Francisco was playing the music to her cat, her 19-year-old cat. She said the cat just loved it. So if you've got sick animals or anything else, you're very welcome to the CD. This is very much an African thing. I remember my teacher said to me once, the trouble with you white people is you've lost the way. You are like papers blowing in the wind. You have forgotten your ancestors. You don't even know who they are. You don't make any rituals to them. You don't make any offerings to them. They can't help you. You know, you have to ask to receive. All right, so any questions? I think that's absolutely true. I think the one way to sort of help is to recognize that they were victims of their own conditioning, you know, that they did the best they could maybe under the circumstances, that the person who was abusive was abused. So that's where the forgiveness can sometimes be more, you know, easier. What I recommend, which anybody can do, because I deal with this a lot, is to write a letter describing all the terrible things that was done to them. Everything, you know, in the minutest detail. Make it as cathartic as possible. And then take some sacred herb or medicinal plant and burn it with a letter, because this is a ritual, and anything that's done in ritual form will be acknowledged by the spirit world much more powerfully than if you just speak it out. And the medicinal plant will connect you strongly to that realm. A sacrifice, an animal sacrifice, will get immediate attention, and that's why they do it in Africa, but it's not going to happen here. But there's a lot of wisdom in sacrifice. And they eat the animal, so it's no different to going, you know, and buying chicken in the supermarket. And then they go to a river or an ocean or a lake, and they burn it at home probably. Burn the plant with the letter, and burn all the grievances and all the judgments and all the pain, and then go to the ocean or a river or whatever. Throw the ashes in the ocean, wrap it in a bit of toilet paper so it doesn't blow back in your face, and most important, walk away and do not look back. Because in the spirit world, if you look back, it means you're not sure, you know, and then they're not released from their pain. So that's something anybody can do, but if the spirit is still hanging around, then you probably want to get some help. Remember that if somebody dies and they keep appearing in dreams to you, more than likely they're earthbound. You know, if after 3 months or a year, they're still coming very easily in dreams, it might be that they're earthbound. Either that, or you're a very good receptacle for the dreams, and then you might want to get some help for that, or do a ritual to forgive, release, tell them, no, you're fine, you can go over. But I think those are two things I've found useful. Yeah?
What is a guru-devotee relationship?
You know, there is no such thing as a guru in my mind. A guru is a teacher. And if it's a real guru, it's a guide from the side and not a sage on a stage. So anybody who's telling you what to do and how to do it, I think it's fine for the process. You know, like I learnt what I learnt from the Africans, but I'm not an African Sangoma. I don't speak Zulu, you know. I don't know their culture, I don't know their tradition, and that's not who I am. So I'm different. So you find your own way. You take all the tools, you look at them as tools, like along the way. You adopt the tools you want and you discard the ones you don't want. There are frequently shadow sides to the guru persona that you don't want to adopt. So take the good and leave the bad behind. Don't ignore the fact that the person, you know, don't go and not have a teacher because they have a shadow side. Because you can learn a lot from folks who have, you know, but recognize the shadow and then move away from it so it doesn't get you, you know.
I've been given discernment. So
Yeah. But I'm sure the guru is a good thing, but there comes a time when if you can find one, you know, then good luck to you. Mostly it's very hard to find one. But then there comes a time when you just, you know, they say, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. It's just work, you know. That's the way it is. Yeah.